The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem with Dr. Nathaniel Brandon.
What do I mean by the practice of living consciously? First and foremost, respect for facts. If something is a fact, it's a fact. And I know that my pretending it isn't won't change anything except to leave me blind and dysfunctional. When Jack Welch, the CEO of General Electric, was asked to what he attributed his extraordinary success in turning GE around, he said, the high level of confidence we brought to the project and an unflinching willingness to look at reality, even if it was painful. That's a special practical application of operating consciously. Living consciously means being present to what we are doing while we are doing it. If our child is talking to us, being present to the encounter. If our spouse is talking to us, being present to the encounter. If our boss, our customer, our client, our supervisor is talking to us, being present to the encounter. Being in reality. Another meaning of living consciously is being eagerly interested in any facts, information, feedback, pleasant or unpleasant, that bears on our interests, values, projects, and goals. Versus having made up my mind in advance that I know everything I need to know and proceeding blindly. Always being on the lookout for more knowledge, more information, more feedback that bears on my goals and projects. That's one of the great meanings of living consciously. Also, being keenly interested to find out if any of my assumptions are mistaken. Looking for information to confirm or disconfirm, and if I get signals that my assumptions in some respects are mistaken, willingness to revise my thinking. During the late 70s and 1980s, a lot of companies went down in flames or significantly lost market share because the leaders ignored evidence after evidence, that policies and strategies which had once been adaptive no longer fit the new marketplace realities. And rather than adjust to the new realities, they closed their eyes and just re-uttered the mantra, this always worked in the past, or things have got to get better, and saw their more conscious competitors take away market share from them. Yet another example of living consciously has to do with the desire to understand not just the external world, but the internal world. To understand my own motivation, to understand my own needs, feelings, values, aspirations, so I don't act out of self-blindness. We all know people who are very proud of their knowledge of high finance or celestial mechanics or accounting, but who couldn't be more oblivious to what's happening inside their own being. Such people don't tend to have successful personal lives. They are unconscious in one of the key areas of life, the personal. When I'm working with people in corporations or in my work as a psychotherapist, I sometimes like to invite people to meditate on a simple question. If I were to operate 5% more consciously on my job tomorrow, what might I do or do differently? Just about anybody who's willing to meditate on that for a few minutes will find some new thoughts occur. And then I coach them to experiment with those behaviors and see if they like what happens. Then I have more specialized technology. Here's a story or two that might interest you. Some years ago, I was consulting with the CEO of a company, and the company was growing very, very fast. And one day he came to see me and he said, Nathaniel, I have a problem I got to talk about, but it's very mortifying and embarrassing. I said, shoot. He said, we're growing very fast. I need to hire a senior consultant, and I'm afraid to hire somebody who might be smarter than I am. And after complimenting him for his courage and candor in putting such a problem on the table for discussion, I gave him a homework assignment. This is very typical of how I work. I said, would you be willing for the next 2 weeks until we meet again, every morning when you get to your office, to conduct a small experiment? You open your notebook, private notebook, you date the page, and you write at the top of the page this half a sentence. I call it a sentence stem, or an incomplete sentence. If I brought 5% more consciousness to my fear of hiring a brilliant consultant, if I brought 5% more consciousness to my fear of hiring a brilliant consultant, and then write as rapidly as you can 5 to 10 endings for that stem, and do it every day for 2 weeks, and then let's talk about the problem. He came back in 2 weeks laughing and said, nothing to talk about. I solved it all. He said, you know, naturally there were repetitions, but a lot of new stuff started coming out of me. And by the time the 2 weeks were up, I had worked through the whole problem. It's as if the technique allowed me to radiate the problem with a super intensity of awareness. I love that because I love being an educator in the true sense. And do you know what the word educate means? It comes from a Latin word, and it means to draw out, not to stuff in. And so, thank you for understanding that. Another fast story. This is a Texas story. I wish I had the accent to tell the story right, because it's better with an accent. Many years ago, one of the interesting things about my work is that aside from the people who come to see me in California, I have clients all over the country who've read my books and want to do therapy with me and consult with me on the telephone. And quite a number of years ago, I had a female attorney, I think she was then 48, in Houston. And we would have weekly sessions on the phone. And she had a very thick, rather adorable Texas accent. But the problem was that when she became upset, I often couldn't understand what she was saying. One day, she did something that clients like to do when she waited till 15 minutes from the end of the session, and then she sprung a problem on me. She'd somehow fallen into a disastrous love affair, and she was terribly unhappy, and she began to cry. And from that time on, I couldn't understand what she was talking about. First, I got every second word, then every fifth word. And I looked at the clock, and I knew I had another appointment backed up behind her, and I couldn't leave her in this much pain, and I didn't have a clue what to do. Fortunately, I had an inspiration. I said, stop. I have an idea that I think will help you. She said, oh, what? I said, for the next week, until we can talk again, every morning you go to your notebook before you start the day's work, and you write this incomplete sentence in your notebook. If I bring 5% more consciousness to my relationship with X, X being the name of the guy, write 6 to 10 endings, don't worry, there'll be repetitions, something will happen. Well, she had something to do that made her feel better, she thanked me and hung up. A week later, she phones me up and in this adorable Texas accent says to me, well, Nathaniel, of course you knew I had to get rid of that bum. And then, with the most wonderful lucidity, she proceeded to explain everything wrong with this guy. And again, what made me feel very great was that I didn't force any conclusion on her. I gave her a piece of technology which allowed her to shift to a much higher level of consciousness. And so one of the things I teach in my own work is techniques for how to bring more consciousness to some troublesome area in our life. Okay, the second pillar of self-esteem is self-acceptance. And what that means is my willingness to own, take responsibility for, experience, look at my thoughts, my emotions, my past actions, not necessarily liking, condoning, admiring, but without self-repudiation, without denial, without disowning, giving myself the space and the freedom and the permission to know what my thoughts are, to experience my thoughts, to experience my emotions, to experience and look at my actions without saying, that's not me, that couldn't be me. without slashing away pieces of myself in order to fit some official self-image or self-concept. All of us at times have emotions that we aren't especially happy to have. Fear, anger, rage, envy, jealousy, inconvenient lust. Someone will explain to you what that means. Can I give myself permission to experience them? I don't have to act on them. I don't have to be run by them. Can I be willing to own, take responsibility for, look at, feel my feelings without denial, without disowning, without self-castigation, without bad-mouthing myself? That's a very important aspect of self-esteem. And parenthetically, the way you begin to teach it to children is you give them the freedom to feel what they feel without giving them little lectures of what they should feel and what they shouldn't feel. We can't have absolute freedom of action. We have to have judgment and limits on what we can do, but we need to have freedom of consciousness. Hope that makes sense to you.